And sometimes artists choose not to participate in the process. So there are some artists where in the past people have said, oh, how, why didn't this win? Or how wasn't this recognized by the Grammys? Well, the answer sometimes.
Jordan, what's happening, man? How are you feeling?
I'm good, man. Another day, another dollar. How you doing, bro?
That's right. There it is. That's the motto, baby. Well, on today's show, we have a very special guest, Shannon Herber. Shannon is the genre manager for pop, electronic, and dance at the Recording Academy. This is an incredible episode. She peels back the metaphorical curtains a bit as far as how the Recording Academy and the Grammys operate. And what I also really particularly enjoyed is even outside of a lot of the work that she does at the Recording Academy, which we'll talk about, and you'll see that there's a lot more to the organization beyond just putting on the massive production and award show that is the Grammys. So, but even outside of her work within the Recording Academy, she's able to devote a lot of her time and on the side towards interesting social impact projects. And I think for me, something I'm very passionate and excited about is how musicians and people in the music industry can leverage their platform to drive social change. And I think she's an example of somebody that's doing that, both within the music industry and beyond. So hats off to her, and really excited for what you guys are going to hear as we dive into this episode. What stood out to you, Jordan?
Yeah, so going into this episode, and you'll hear it, I sort of didn't really know how the process worked. And I wanted to illustrate to myself as well as to our listeners from A to Z how artists get nominated and win. And she was able to do that very clearly for the people that are wondering. Not only that, but ways to strategize in order to potentially be nominated for a Grammy and potentially to win a Grammy. So, we get into a lot of things as it pertains to that process. I know a lot of people right now it seems like if someone gets nominated, it seems like it's coming out of some sort of crystal ball, but there actually is a process to it. We also talk about, including me, I thought, I had no idea. We also talk about how people vote for the Grammys, who's eligible to become someone to actually vote for Grammy Awards. So in the past 2 years, obviously, a lot of people have watched the Grammys, and I think this episode will clear up exactly a little more how people are deemed qualified enough to make those decisions. And I also, like you, I really appreciate the fact that we got a little bit into the social justice aspect of the music industry and how music can actually not only, give us some of our favorite songs and create some of our memories for our lives, but additionally give back to our communities today and in the present moment. So I'm definitely glad to speak to Shannon. I'm super excited for everybody to hear this conversation. It was a fun one too. There's a lot of laughs during this one. So
there it is. Well, without any further ado, let's get into it. Shannon, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing, Sam?
Yeah, doing very well. I'm very excited to have you on. I think for starters, would really just love to have you set the stage with a little bit of your journey into the industry and what you felt some of your big breaks were in the journey.
Yeah. Let's see. So I've been in the music industry for about 15 years. It's been my only career. I guess when I was in college, I really decided I'm going to go for this full force. And at the time I was living in Massachusetts, going to school out there. And I got a last minute internship for the Spoleto Arts Festival in Charleston, South Carolina. And so I moved down there for the summer and really loved it and found a really amazing musical community that, is still thriving to this day. And I still have friends out of that community. And so while I was there, I kind of realized okay, maybe at this particular moment, arts, arts nonprofits aren't for me, but, I definitely, this is what I want to do. And so after I graduated from undergrad, I was like, well, it's, let's see, early 2000s, and there weren't any major music business specific grad schools at the time, the Clive Davis School didn't exist then. And, the Jimmy Iovine, Dr. Dre School didn't exist back then. So I just moved out to LA, decided to go to grad school at USC and figure it out while I was out here. And what ended up happening actually is that I ended up getting another internship at Universal Music while I was a grad student at USC. And that was probably my biggest break, because from that, I learned so much working at a record label, one of the largest record labels in the world, really. And so I learned so much. But then on top of it, once I graduated, they didn't have a place for me, but they recommended me to someone else. And so I was immediately able to get my first gig as a junior publicist. And then like a year and a half later, they called me back and said, hey, a job came open. We trained you. We love you. Do you want to come back? And so by, 25, I was a publicity and artist relations manager at Universal Music. And so I think that that's like, even today, that's something that I tell young folks is I'm always like, I know working for free sucks, but trust me, this business is who you know. And they don't actually care. They care that you have a degree. They don't actually care what it's in. They're not really going to look at it. They just want to see that you did something. And then after that, it's all going to be like essentially on the job training. They want to see you do the work. So if you show up and do well, then, they're going to be able to stick their necks out for you, which is the network you need to create. So that was probably, my first real big break into the industry.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because for the first few years of my career, I actually never had to spruce up my resume because I kept getting internships from people that I knew. And I always say that to people when they're looking for experience in the industry. It's like it's more about who you know, especially in the beginning. I remember one of the last internships I got at Mass Appeal Records. I was being interviewed, and at the end of the interview, I said, "You don't want my resume?" And the person said, "Oh yeah, I guess so. Okay." And then I gave it to you. But it was because I had already been referred by somebody that he trusted a lot, somebody he liked a lot. And I think leaning into your network immediately for situations like that is an easy way to get into the door fairly quickly and with a lot of respect as soon as you enter a room,
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually in my entire career, which, at this point is 15 years, I've never gotten a job based on a blind resume submission. Literally every job I've ever gotten is because somebody knew me, or like you just said, I was recommended from somebody, by somebody they trusted. So I 100% agree with that I always tell people that the music industry is a really big place, but it's a very small pond. And particularly if you're in it for a minute, you're going to know everyone. And so they're going to know you. So, you got to do your job well and get to know people and be nice, because that will follow you later.
Quick question, sidebar actually on networking. I've gotten a few emails, text messages about kind of how to start that process. What's a way to actually just kind of start your network? Because I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast, they actually are from areas that aren't LA or New York, or they've just kind of gotten to those areas, and they're not necessarily sure how to start building their network in an organic way, as opposed to reaching out to an executive and being like, hey, I need a job. What's a way to kind of expand that network and seem genuine and obviously let things grow organically as well?
Yeah. I guess from my perspective, and this may be a pre-COVID, answer, unfortunately, is I used to tell people music exists everywhere. And so what would you do for fun? Are you going to go to the rave, at the local warehouse? Are you going to, Club 930 if you live in DC? Where are you going to have your fun experience in music? And then show up and say to that person, hey, I do this in my free time. I really, really love this. If you ever need help, let me know. I will show up. I will stock your merch table. I will, clean up after a show. I will be part of your flyer team for a rave, whatever it is. Because again, that's sort of an informal internship. And if you're doing it and you're being a part of the scene wherever you live, that's going to help as well. So, that's what I would suggest, at least, is because most of the folks I know, particularly in dance music, that's how they got their network started. And that's how, they kind of did everything, is that they were just like, hey, I go to these raves all the time. Can I pass out some flyers? And they're like, yeah. Okay, great. Come back tomorrow.
For free, tight.
Yeah. Exactly. No one's going to say no to free.
So I know it's come a long way, and I think you just continue to level up as far as opportunities you're taking on and what you're able to accomplish and provide with the organizations you're working with. Can you speak a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like now, or some of the core elements of your role and responsibilities?
Yeah. So now I am the pop and dance electronic genre manager for the Grammys. And so basically what that means is I've got 5 categories that are sort of six categories that are my responsibility. And so I handle all 4 of the pop categories and the 2 dance electronic categories. So a lot of people ask, is that a full-time job? Yes, it's a full-time year-round job. Just because you only see it one day doesn't mean that we just put it together yesterday, right? All that. Just took that one day. So basically what it means is I manage sort of those categories throughout the year. So we have this sort of like 9-month process, right? Where probably about like June, we start to get all of our entries, and we get about 22,000 entries a year. Because keep in mind, we have 84 categories. And so even though you might only see, each year it's different, right? So maybe this year we have 8 categories on the show. Maybe next year we have 7 categories on the show. Generally, it's somewhere between 7 to 10 categories that actually make it on air, which means that there's anywhere, from 74 to 78 categories that you maybe don't see. That's a lot of music, a lot of time, a lot of really amazing artists. And so that's kind of what we do throughout the rest of the year, is that within our categories, we are managing the process of the entries. We're making sure that they're verified, making sure that they came out during the right eligibility period, making sure that they haven't been released before in a different, a different way, particularly for some of our song categories. Those are songwriters awards. So that means that if it's a cover, that doesn't count because, it had to have been written that year as opposed to recorded that year. So there's all these sort of like little rules that we have to look out for when things are being entered. And then once we get through that first process, then we come up with the first ballot. We send that out to our general voting membership. Those votes come back to us, and then we get to a second round of listening, and that's called our nominations review committees. Only certain categories have those, not every category. And so then that'll be folks who are voting members of the Academy. They'll listen to what comes back. And then what they'll do is they will take those top 15 or 20 votes, depending on the categories. They'll listen, they vote. That becomes the nominations. We send those back out to the main voting membership. And that's the second ballot. Voting membership listens again. That comes back to us. And then at that point, I don't see anything that happens after that because, obviously our CEO and our TV committee and some other folks who have to know for the show will know early who is the winners. But other than that, in order to keep it really super secret lockdown, nobody else in the building knows. So even most of the awards department, who are the folks behind the scenes on the day of the show, like making sure that the right people stand up and making sure the right people are accepting the award and taking them from, stage to the winner's circle to get all their photos and stuff taken. Even we don't know who the winners are until the morning of. So anytime you see any of those like leaks come out that are like somebody at the Grammys says, don't believe it. Don't believe it. Because we don't know.
You heard it here first. Don't believe it.
That's right. We don't know.
It kind of reminds me, I had a friend that was on Homeland. It was funny. I actually didn't realize he was on Homeland until I was watching Homeland. And I was like, bro, you didn't tell me you were on Homeland? Yeah, like the show.
I love that show.
Yeah, me too. And he said that he had no idea what happened outside of his scenes because they like weren't allowed to tell him. It kind of reminds me of something like that, where it's like, he had no spoilers on anything that happened in the season. They only gave him enough context to act in his scene. And that was it. And I feel like you generally have to do that for like really high level production stuff.
Yeah, totally. And you nailed it. That's exactly what it is. It's like everyone's on a need to know basis at that point.
Right.
And there's a lot of us that don't need to know. So
right. Exactly. And also it's exciting, right? Like everyone's fan of music. So if you find out a winner early, like what's to stop you from, if people aren't supposed to know, the people that aren't supposed to know, what's to stop them from telling their mom or their brother? And then that may turn into a much bigger thing. Totally. I'm glad you kind of went through the process a little bit because I feel like in terms of the Grammys, how people are chosen, how people win, people don't really know what that process is like. I mean, I know for me, when I worked with a Grammy nominated artist, it seemed like it was some magical ball that all of a sudden spit out the artist's name. We were like, oh! I don't have any idea how it happened or how it works or anything like that. So I guess, is there any sort of strategy that artists can somehow do or follow in order to somehow be noticed by the Academy, or is there that element of like crystal ball? Oh, it's your year. You're lucky. You got it.
That's right. I mean, I would say, there's like anything. I think it's a little bit of both, right? It's a little bit of luck. It's a little bit of strategy. But strategy only in that, particularly if you live in Los Angeles, right? We've got a ton of billboards everywhere. Whenever you always know it's award season because you're driving down Sunset and there's like an Emmy campaign billboard and an Oscars campaign billboard, a Grammy campaign billboard, So like we're essentially just like the Oscars and the Emmys and the Tonys and everything, we're a membership organization, which means you have to be a part of the community in order to vote. But more specifically for us, you have to be a peer. So you have to be a music creator, a songwriter, producer, engineer, artist, so we don't even allow managers or, a lot of like label heads get really annoyed with us because they can't vote.
Interesting. I didn't realize that.
So it is, when we like say it's a peer voted award, that's what we mean, is that you have to prove to us that you're actually a music creator in order to vote. Because we do have another category that's called professional membership. And that's all those folks. And they get all the same benefits, right? They can join all like the boards of local chapters and stuff like that. They go to all the events. They just don't get to vote. In order to vote, you have to be a creator of some kind, and you have to prove it to us. Like, there's an application process. We invite you to be a member after everyone sort of vetted you. You have to be recommended by 2 people. So it's like really detailed. So, when I say there's strategy involved, the strategy is putting out really amazing music, because the music will always win, at least in my opinion. I think it does more often than not. But secondly, being a real part of the community, knowing these people, knowing the producers, the songwriters, the musicians. Like if you're in a classical, if what you do is classical music, knowing all of the conductors, knowing all of the symphonies, knowing all the violin players, like being a part of your community. To go back to like my earlier Charleston discussion, a few of the people that I'm still friends with from Charleston are in a like jazz gullah band called Ranky Tanky. And they've put out a few albums that have been like, really, really critically acclaimed and number 1 on jazz charts and things like that. And so they kind of came to me and were like, well, we think these are amazing. What can we do? And so I just said, get involved with your chapter, get involved with, letting people know what your songs are about, letting people know that this is like gullah music and why it's important to South Carolina and what it means to the history of the Low Country and those sorts of things, because the music is good. So if you just get your name out there, people will hear it. And they actually ended up winning a Grammy last year. And so, which to your point earlier about like, but if you don't know, then that's exciting. I didn't know they were going to win until the day. And then I was there and they were there and I was just like, yeah, guys, this is amazing. So I definitely also get that joy of like, when good people win, like the process works, good music is awarded. And I really love that. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I think that's where all the fans in us, even as people that work in the industry, really get to let that fandom thrive. When it comes to the organization as a whole, what do you like? How is the organization structured? Obviously, you're a genre manager. I'm sure there's a massive team with regards to the production and all the back end logistics that entails. Which I'm sure is just thrilling. All the little things that need to go right for that to be smooth. But what can you speak to the other elements and how the organization as a whole is structured?
Well, I think what a lot of people don't know is that the Grammys are a nonprofit. And so, or I guess technically I should say, we as the Grammys are the Recording Academy, right, is the official name of our umbrella. And we're a not-for-profit. We have a fully nonprofit arm called Music Cares, which a lot of people know about. Everyone's like, they either got like a COVID grant from Music Cares this year, or Music Cares helped them in the past, like sometimes we'll like, give money to guitarists. Let's say they broke a hand and then they can't anymore and they makeover, and then we would kind of step in with that, or like a lot of older blues musicians who have fallen on hard times, we'll help them like pay their rent and stuff like that. So Music Cares is actually under the Grammy umbrella, and so is the Grammy Museum. And so there are, as is the Latin Grammys. So there are all kinds of elements of things that we do that are under this larger umbrella called, the Recording Academy. We even have an advocacy arm that is based out of Washington, D.C., and that does things like advocate for, the Fair Pay, Fair Play Act, which is to allow artists in the United States to finally get money off of their terrestrial radio play, which, we don't here. And conversely, because European and global artists don't get money in the United States when their records play on terrestrial radio, American artists don't get them anywhere else. So American artists get screwed twice because we don't get terrestrial radio play here, and then we also don't get it internationally. And so we advocate in DC to, we're trying to get that passed. We're trying to get a lot of some smaller things passed as well. So things like just being able to bring your instrument on the plane, even if you have to buy it a second ticket, if it's like a cello, right, and it's really large, or, just to not have to put it in the cargo hold, because everybody knows how many guitars get broken by cargo folks. So little things like that you don't think make a difference, but if that's somebody's livelihood and they don't want it broken when they have to travel for a gig, that actually matters. So we have a whole arm that does that as well. And so, yes, the production is a large focus of what we do, and it does give us a lot of our operating budget, but it's definitely not the only thing that we do. And on top of it, we also hire out to outside production companies. So, Ken Ehrlich had been our producing partner for the last 30, 40 years. And he recently retired. And so now we're working with a new gentleman named Ben Winston, who I think just moved over. He's done the Brits and some other UK award shows, things like that. So he's our new producing partner, the new executive producer for the show starting this year. We do obviously have, in-house folks who do production and stuff like that. But, we're also a membership focused organization. So we have chapters all over the country that are focused on community building, that are focused on things like our Grammy U program, which is we go out to colleges and universities. And we try to reach out to the kids who are in music business programs or who are in music programs. So if they're like, oh, I'm a piano player, I'm a drummer, I'm a trumpet player at Berkeley, whatever, we reach out to them. They can then become Grammy U members, and that gives them access to all kinds of programs for students, to become a part of the music community. So there's a lot of things that like the Grammys do outside of the show itself. Because really at the end of the day, yes, we have this big show. Yes, we give these awards. But I mean, what we do is we're a company that serves the music community.
Mm-hmm. Right. I actually was in Grammy U very briefly in college.
That's amazing.
I went to NYU's music business program, and there were a few people in my major that were close friends of mine that got me to go to a couple events and things like that.
Nice.
Also,
how did you like it? I mean, I'm just curious if you think that it helped you at all or helped anybody.
No, I definitely thought it was awesome. I took like 7 classes that semester. So I ended up not being able to go to too many events. And that's why I eventually stopped going. But I knew a couple people that actually prioritized it over a lot of the work that they did in school. They liked it so much. So one of my best friends was in it for like years. So,
oh, nice.
I only have good things to say about it. I also got to meet Danny Brown through an event and I freaked out back then.
Oh yeah. Nice. We joke that like Grammy U folks are going to be really disappointed when they, grow up and become a real member, because like real members don't get all this stuff we get Grammy U kids.
Yeah. It's funny. I used to have interns at my old job, and I would always, in addition to get them to learn things, try to like impress them. And I feel like that's generally what people do in the music industry for people that aren't in it yet. It's almost why we have this podcast, right? It's like, you're so cool. This is so cool. What we do is so cool. And that's funny to hear that extends to like Grammy U also, and doing that with college students.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So I guess like you do a lot of different things, obviously year round. You have a few different roles, talent booker, you oversee a few different categories at the Grammys. I guess at a high level for each of the things that you do, what does like success look like? Partially, like what does the night of the Grammys look like? and what does the lead up look like? Some of these other programs in your role, like how do you define success at the end of the year? And then how do you use that to, I guess, goal set for the next year?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really great question, actually, because, none of the answers I'm going to give have anything to do with like money or data metrics or anything like that.
I make a whole lot of money.
I mean, listen.
Did I get the bag or did I not get the bag?
That's right.
No, I'm kidding.
I wish that were the case. Let me repeat, the Grammys are a not-for-profit. So there's that. But no, I mean, I joke, but I love what I do. I'm definitely one of those people that like, my other like, the other thing I love to do, my other hustle is like social justice work. And so I was joking with my parents where I'm like, I'm not going to be the rich daughter. So that's the other one. You're going to have to talk to her about that. I'm always the one that's like, but the purity of the So for
take
me,
money from Wall Street hacks. I'm out here changing my community.
Precisely. So, I mean, I guess for me, success is definitely like, I think when the nominations come out, because each of us that's a genre manager, right? We love our genres. Most of us are experts in them. Most of us have, lived in them for years. Like I was the tour manager and director of operations for Moby for multiple years and have been in the dance music specifically for like the last 10 years of my career. And so, dance is a community that I am very passionate about. It's a community that I really love. And the music and the people really mean something to me. So I take a lot of pride in the nominations every year because I do want them to be, the best of whatever was out there, the year before. Cause like, if you see, the show in, let's say 2021 coming up, right, then we're still talking about stuff that was released from, late 2019 through mid 2020. So there is somewhat of like a lag between, when the stuff is released and then what year you see it in the show. But so, when those nominations come out in like November, December every year, I really wait to see what the community thinks of them, because that's my metric of like personal success. Like, did I do enough outreach? Did I go to enough shows? Did I talk to enough people to know what was up and coming? I think there's a misnomer or a misconception, I should say, between the idea that everyone thinks that like all these things are released every year and that the Grammys can just sort of like pick and choose. We actually can't. When I say we get 22,000 entries, I mean that though you have to submit your material. Your label has to submit it, a member of the Academy has to submit it. Like it has to get to us somehow. We can't just take everything that's been released in a certain year. And sometimes artists choose not to participate in the process. So there are some artists where in the past people have said, oh, why didn't this win? Or how wasn't this recognized by the Grammys? Well, the answer sometimes is they didn't submit. And we can't just, like I said, pick and choose. We can only really take from what has been submitted to us. And so every genre manager really takes it upon themselves to do the outreach, to see what's popping, see what, is really making waves within our communities, to really get out there to see like, okay, if we missed this, would that make us look bad when these nominations come out? Because our community says this is what's best this year. If it doesn't get submitted to us, people won't understand why, and they won't know that it didn't. So we do a lot of outreach to stay current, to, really make sure that people understand that we're paying attention. I know that dance electronic has so many subgenres. Oh my God. Yeah. So, I get that so much where it's like, somebody's like, well, how come no drum and bass artists? How come there's no underground? How come there's no UK grime? I'm like, I'm trying.
I didn't even know that was a genre yet. I didn't even know. It just came out 2 weeks ago.
Right? I know. Like, I'm getting a lot of shit. I'm getting a lot of like crap right now about like, Jersey Club. Like Jersey Club.
Jersey Club does not need to be added into the Grammys. With all due respect. No. Those are my personal opinions. By no means are they reflecting those of our guest, Shannon Herber.
He's like, wait, time out.
Yeah.
Right.
Let it be clear, Recording Academy PR team.
Exactly. That didn't come from me.
Right.
But everybody's got their favorite and they all want to see it represented and they definitely should. But it's just like, okay, well, if I didn't get New Jersey Club this year, I can't personally do anything about that except try and make more inroads and more connections with the Jersey Club community. And so, that's just all really like a long-winded way of saying that, like, if the nominations come out and everybody in the dance community is basically like, yeah, that's good. I like that. That's a good representation. Then I'm like, okay, success. I helped to well represent our community this year.
That's awesome. So I know.
Sorry, Sam. I have a follow-up question. Some of it, obviously, a lot of it is up to the people that vote, though, right? Like,
all of it. Yeah. Let me be super clear.
Yeah.
I'm just like the administrator that's rolling the ball down the hill. I don't vote. I don't have any we as the Recording Academy we don't make quality controls, none of it. Right. It's all up to the voters for sure. But in terms of making sure on our end that we're getting the right entries, that, we're getting the right people as voting members, that we're getting enough of them, that like we're hitting demographic representation, we're hitting age representation, we're hitting geographic representation, that we want our voting body to represent the community. So, it's a lot like the government. Like if only a certain sector of, the population is voting, well, then those nominations are going to reflect that population. And so that's where we come in, is that we try to broaden, the scope of like who's voting, the scope of what's being submitted to us, that kind of thing. But as for like, who's making those decisions, it is all voters, absolutely 100% voters.
That's amazing. So when it comes to, because I know you kind of even helped drive like a 35% year-over-year increase as far as helping ensure that there were more underrepresented subgenres and communities in the Dance Electronic Award entries. So tactically, this is nurturing relationships, keeping your finger to the pulse, nurturing relationships with different managers, independent labels, helping ensure that they're actually making submissions.
Yeah, I nailed it. I mean, like I use the government analogy quite a bit because it's really true. The same thing I do in my social justice work where somebody's like, man, I don't vote because I don't like these people. I'm like, well, then you don't get to bitch. The same thing is true with like the Academy. The first time somebody comes to me with like, a complaint about a nominee, I'm always like, well, did you vote? No. Okay, well then I can't help you because that's what it is. And so, you totally nailed it, because then a lot of people will be like, well, that's expensive. I don't want to join up. I'm like, listen, Academy membership is like $100 a year. If this is your job, you can write it off, right? Because it's considered a professional membership. But B, that's less than $10 a month. So, do you want to invest in your career? Do you want to invest in seeing the best of our communities represented in the Grammys? Is this an investment you're willing to make, as opposed to sitting on the sidelines and just sort of complaining that you never see people like you represented? Because it really does matter. Some of these categories only have maybe, let's say, 100 entries in them. I think dance album this year, Best Dance Electronic Album, had like 118 entries in it. And, not everyone who's a voting member is an expert in dance electronic. So not everyone is going to vote in that category. And so therefore, your vote actually does truly matter, because maybe you're one of, 4,000 members who are voting in that category. So you absolutely can make a difference. And, for those folks who want to say like, well, we don't see any Black women in dance, and that's absolutely a valid statement. But also at the same time, I kind of go back to like the representation is, okay, well, are you a member? Are you making a difference on the inside? Are you voting to see that representation? And so that's, that is where I come in, is to go to all these folks, do, Grammy 101s with them, do the outreach to the labels, do the outreach to, UK companies, to Netherlands companies. So like a Spin-In Records, or a Hospital Records, or, something that's not US based. To say like, hey, we really care. We want your artists represented. We want you guys to be, voting members. We want you to have a better relationship with us, and to see yourselves represented in the entries and in the nominations. There was a shift from, maybe not everybody agreed with what was happening with some of our genres. And then lately there's been, I think, a real shift towards, we as a company are making a concerted effort to bring in a wider swath of the music community. And I think we're starting to see that reflected in nominations and wins.
Right. So I can kind of already see how your social justice work and the skills that you probably develop when you do that interact with what you do. For example, getting representation at the Recording Academy. But I want to dive a little bit deeper into that. So how do you think your social justice work, first of all, like what is some of it that you do? And also, how does it interact with the work that you do at the Recording Academy? Obviously, Music Cares sounds like something that kind of crosses both. And also, like, what are some of the skill sets you've developed that kind of help you in one or the other?
Oh, yeah. Those are awesome questions. Thank you, Jordan.
You're welcome.
I was like, oh, okay, these are really in depth. Let's get into it. Yeah, Music Cares is awesome. I love Music Cares. Like, I think that's the other really fun thing, is that during like those 3 months when, we're kind of done wrapping up, the past year's show, we haven't quite moved into the next year's show cycle yet. I usually am doing a lot of outreach. So I'm going to a lot of shows, going, like I said, going to other countries, sort of visiting other labels and things like that. But also within that time, particularly this year, because of COVID, we were giving out all of those grants. And so it was kind of an all hands on deck situation, because there were just so many applications and so many people who were hurting and still are, it's not like COVID's gone away, but, so many folks who really needed help, because particularly in the touring industry, which obviously I come from. And so, I love all my tour folks, but they were losing jobs left and right. All the work they had lined up for the next couple years is gone. And so, I immediately jumped in and was like, okay, how can I help? I don't, I can do my awards work, for a couple hours a day. And then how can I help jump in to work on COVID stuff? And so, that was really, really heartwarming and fulfilling for me to be able to like actually see the work that I was doing have like an immediate effect, and an immediate effect for my friends, because when people whose application I didn't even process, somebody else did, but then they would reach out to me and be like, I got my, Music Cares check. Thank you guys so much. This is what it's going to do for me. I can pay my rent this month. I can buy bills, I can pay bills. I can buy groceries. Like, see like that real world effect was amazing. And what I do outside of the Academy is I'm part of 2 groups. One is LA Forward, which is a local LA progressive political organization. And so we work to move progressive political campaigns forward. So things in LA like Measure J, Prop 15, and Measure J is like a defund. Well, it's a reassignment of money that to social programs from a pile that used to belong to LAPD and LA sheriffs. And so we've reassigned it to, or the measure, I should say, has now because it passed. So Measure J reassigned, anywhere between 500 million to $1 billion that used to go into the pockets of LAPD and LA sheriffs, and now reassigns it to social programs and to anti-recidivism programs and things like that to really help people get back on their feet. And then we hold local officials accountable. We, try and get people, progressive champions like Nithya Rahman, who just became a city councilwoman for District 4. We try to, really help their campaigns and things like that. Right. And then the other thing I do is a group, it's the LA chapter of a group called Showing Up for Racial Justice. And the LA chapter is specifically called White People for Black Lives, because we're obviously very aware that, really in order for us to stand up and show up for marginalized communities, we have to work within our own community because that's where the power structure lies. And so, we are doing that work. I think also it's probably one of the spaces, one of the things I love about it is that it's called an affinity space, right? And so half of the money that we collect goes to BLMLA because we're their affinity partner. So we take all of our like marching orders from BLMLA. Like, what do you need us to do? Where do you need us to be? How can we help? And then we take, like I said, their direction, give them half of our money. And then the other thing that we do is we sort of like call in our people. So let's say there's somebody who maybe wants to start doing social justice work, but they don't know how. And particularly if they're white, then what that sometimes means is they're going to turn to their nearest Black friend and be like, so what do I do? And so we're trying to like take that burden and that emotional work off of our BIPOC friends and be like, no, that's okay. You can come talk to me and I'll help you. And then whatever stupid things you say, I can absorb. And you're not going to like harm another marginalized person with your stupid question. And I say stupid, like in quotes, because of course there are no stupid questions, but that sort of thing. So
slightly
it's a lot of like,
question. I got you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's a lot of essentially like, calling our cousins and trying to do the work to like, call, let's say maybe, underprivileged white people in Georgia and say, hey, I think you might need to vote a different way, or how can we help explain why maybe Raphael Warnock is better than Kelly Loeffler, or, hey, let me talk to you about John Ossoff instead of David Perdue, that kind of thing. So and so sorry to answer your question in a super long-winded way. A lot of it is the same. Arts and social justice are like two different sides of the same coin, right?
Right.
Everyone is just trying to like be creative, do good in the world. Usually if you believe in social justice, you're probably also an artist in some way, creative. And if you're creative, then you probably are also, interested in social justice. And so I think there's a lot of people who sort of fall on that middle ground. And so that's sort of where I see that being a bridge, right? Is that a lot of the organizing work that I've learned how to do in some of these social justice groups, I can take back to the Grammys. And then, like I said, when someone comes to me and says, there's been no Black female representation in the history of the nominations within the dance community, I'm like, you're right, let's fix it. Let's talk to those folks. Let's get out there and let's talk to the Honey Dijons. Let's talk to the Alunas. Let's bring those folks together and see what we can do and how can we make everyone, feel like they're part of this community. So I think that's where it's kind of, I didn't realize how similar those two things were until I sort of started, within the last couple of years to kind of marry them together and be like, oh, this is actually all kind of the same work. So
right.
That's kind of...
And I'm sure like a lot of the things that you do, for example, when you call someone in Georgia to try to convince one senator over another, a lot of that is just having really good communication skills. And I know, at least in my experience as a manager, that also translates to speaking to artists, which I'm sure you do a good amount too, and speaking to people at your company, which I'm sure you do a good amount too. So, it seems like a natural extension for working at a nonprofit in the music industry for you to be doing the work that you're doing, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks. I'm glad that all came through.
yeah, absolutely. And I guess as we close out here to kind of like pivot a little bit more back to the dance world, how have you seen the world of dance evolve in recent years? And what do you think's in store for the coming years?
Oh, that's such a great question. It's been really interesting, I think, especially coming from working with Moby for years. He, was such a big part of sort of the creation of dance within the United States and sort of the nexus of it in the early 90s in New York and all that kind of stuff. And so I ended up seeing a lot of like the old plur values, right? Because he really lived in that era of just like peace, love, unity, all that kind of stuff. And we all know hopefully we all know that, dance comes from marginalized communities, and that's, where it started. And so to kind of see, as things generally do, go from a marginalized community to hit the mainstream, to be taken over by the mainstream, to then sometimes kind of circle back around, I feel like we're on that other cusp within dance. Like I'm starting to see a lot of people be like, we're taking it back. It's not going to be the bro, dance that it is, or that it has been mainstream wise for a while. Not to malign like any artists who've been really amazing and sort of bringing dance, I think, to a more mainstream multinational space. Like we're grateful for, or I guess I only must speak for myself, right? Like I'm grateful that it brought more eyes to the community, but at the same time, it's like, much like anything else, when it gets too big, you lose control of it, right? And so I feel like I'm starting to see those folks kind of wanting to take control of the genre again. Like you're starting to see a resurgence, I think, of like, Chicago house and Detroit techno, and a real return of marginalized folks to reclaim the space and say, we started it and we're here. And I love that. I absolutely love that. Mostly because those are the values that I recognize and I relate to. And, so I really love the idea that we're going back to the old school plur values. And also when you look at kids these days, and I know I'm old because I just said kids these days, I'm going to tell someone to get off my lawn in about 5 minutes.
when you look at the what are they, Gen Zers?
Yeah, right. I know. When I look at the Gen Z, I'm like, we don't have any alphabets after that. What's the next kid's going to be?
Gen AA.
Right? We're going to switch to Greek after that. Sorry. Go ahead, Sam.
No, you please. I was just about to say nothing really.
Well, I'll just wrap it up by saying, like, a lot of the Gen Z artists that I see these days don't like being defined by genre. And I totally get that. And so I think what that brings back to us is the reminder that music is boundary transcendent. And so kids are going to do what they're going to do. And if somebody wants to mash, like Moombahton, right, is one of my favorites because it's so many like little bits of everything in it. And I think that's what kids are going to do. And so I'm really excited to see what happens with dance and how it grows in like the next 5 to 10 years, because I think we're just going to see influences from all over the place.
Yeah, no, I love that perspective completely. And I think it's spot on as well. I think even within just like the house genre, I feel like we're starting to see that just have more mainstream appeal amongst such a broad demographic. So I think it's super fun to see.
Yeah, when you were talking about that, Sam, I could see you smile a little bit because Sam fucking loves house music. I could see him like, yeah. And you said Chicago too.
Yeah, even before you said it, when you started talking about that like little arc, I was like Chicago house, like right off top. So spot on. But no, that's amazing. Well, Shannon, I want to thank you so much, both of us too, for coming on. I think your perspectives, a lot of the work you're doing to drive positive change within the music community and far beyond is truly incredible. So thank you for sharing some of your approach and tactics with us. Really grateful.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
It's been so nice to chat with both of you, and I'm so glad to speak to other Chicago house lovers.
Yeah, there it is. Once COVID's over, I'll catch you at the warehouse.
Yeah.
Awesome, Shannon. Well, thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
All right, take care. Damn, well, that was a great episode, man. What'd you think, Jordan?
Yeah, man. Like I was saying in the intro, I think just the fact that this process of the Grammys from A to Z is demystified throughout this episode will be so valuable for people. We not only went through that process, but I think we went through the process fairly charismatically and in a fun and entertaining way. So I'm super glad that we got to do this. I'm super glad that we got to discuss not just the social justice that she does via the Recording Academy and Music Cares, but also the work that she does outside of that, and generally just an interesting story. And I'm glad we did it. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I thought it was incredible. I think what really stuck out too is just how she's so proactive in nurturing those relationships, keeping her fingers on the pulse, and helping empower these different subgenres and that might not necessarily be as familiar with the process, but might still be like worthy applicants. So I thought that was really interesting, because I think how the Recording Academy and Grammys, I mean, that's how they're able to grow and shine a light where it should be shined. And I think she mentioned mentioned not only her efforts, but also the importance of continuing to have a bigger pool of people that are actually a part of the Academy, the different members that are making it responsible for nominations, for the review process. So I think as the Grammys continue to evolve, I think it's people like her that are helping spearhead the progression of the community, both on the artist side as well as on the Recording Academy side itself. So it was really great to hear a little more in depth how that all really works. All right, well, there y'all have it. That's it. It's another week, another podcast. We really appreciate you guys for tuning in, and we'll be back next week. There it is. One love.
See you guys.